Alrighty, here we go. Chapter 3 of the Transcendent series, Book 1, Transcendent. We left off with Adam and Ari heading out from the restaurant in the truck, and Ari is about to explain from the beginning how we all came to this point. First, let me tell you what I know about the Rileys. Phil and Tess Riley moved to Isle of Hope, Georgia, from Washington, D.C. after they had their first child, Lydia, just southeast of Savannah. It felt like the perfect little southern community, full of live oaks dripping with Spanish moss, wraparound porches, and southern hospitality. Phil was a family therapist with a practice in Savannah, and he'd already written 2 successful self-help books. Tess was a registered nurse, but decided to put that career on hold to stay home with Lydia full-time. Everything was ideal until Lydia was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 8 years old. Tess had always had a green thumb, but to fight off the stress of having a sick child and to give Lydia the best chance of fighting off the disease, she dedicated a portion of their backyard to an herb and vegetable garden. She became an expert on foods and herbs with healing properties. And to Tess's credit, Lydia, after going through chemo and a steady diet of organic fruits and vegetables, went into remission for 2 years. But after Lydia had turned 10, the cancer came back with a vengeance. It was during the second round of chemo, while she was staying in the hospital, that Lydia met a boy about her age named Jack. They quickly became friends. Lydia, who had always had a fantastic imagination, would tell him stories, and Jack would draw pictures to go along with them. Jack had a malignant tumor on his lower spine. His mother had neglected to get him treatment before there was irreparable damage, and he was now paralyzed from the waist down. Her alcoholic tendencies caused her to lose job after job, so she gave him up to the state since she didn't feel she was able to care for him anymore. He was now at the hospital to get the tumor removed. So when the Rileys were at the hospital with Lydia, they would visit Jack as well. He was a friendly kid with strawberry blonde hair and a nose full of freckles and an infectious smile. But as Jack was getting better, Lydia was getting worse. And as most people who have come to terms with their fate, she wasn't worried so much for herself, but for the people she loved who she'd left behind. She made her parents promise to take care of Jack, because he had no one else to love him, and she knew they would need each other when the time came for her to pass on. Unable to deny their daughter's last wishes, the Rileys started the process to become Jack's foster parents. They began preparing a room on the first floor and building wheelchair ramps for the front and back porches. They did everything the state required to become foster parents. And 3 months after Jack legally became part of their family, Lydia passed away. After mourning their devastating loss, the Rileys decided to honor their daughter's memory and loving heart by becoming foster parents to special needs children. Between Tessa's nursing background and Phil being a therapist, their home would be the perfect place for these children. And though they fostered many kids through the years, they only adopted 3: Jack, Sadie, and Hector. Jack had already gone off to college by the time they had adopted Sadie, and shortly thereafter they adopted Hector. Sadie had been in a horrible car accident with her biological parents when she was 3 years old. Her parents didn't make it, but Sadie survived, although she was now prone to epileptic seizures due to head trauma from the accident. Other than that, she was a beautiful and charming little girl who loved to dance. Hector came a couple years later. Though he was only 13 months younger than Sadie, he had been in 3 foster homes before coming to the Rileys. He never let his type 1 diabetes get in the way of being a very athletic kid. He also had a great sense of humor and a very loyal heart. Hector was the last child the Rileys took in. They were getting older and felt that their family was complete. That is, until Dan Ramsey, a caseworker for Georgia Child Services, gave them a call asking if he could come by to talk. Normally, they would have passed on the offer, but Dan was a good friend, so they decided to hear him out. He came by, and there was the usual small talk and pleasantries, and then he brought out a file. He explained that he knew they weren't taking any more kids, but he just had a feeling in his gut that this was the home that this child was meant to be in. He told them that she was found by a fisherman floating down a canal on some debris after subtropical storm Andrea had hit. She was bruised and battered and unconscious, so he took her to the hospital right away. She was at the children's hospital in a coma for 4 weeks. When she gained consciousness, she became very agitated and had to be sedated. But since then, she had been very cooperative and docile. She hadn't said a word since waking up, but the doctors say that it was psychosomatic. She couldn't remember anything before the coma, and no one had come forward to claim her. In fact, it was like she appeared out of thin air. She had no dental or medical records anywhere. Most likely, her parents were undocumented immigrants and didn't survive the storm. Dan told them there was something special about this girl. According to the doctors, when she woke up, she didn't understand English or even Spanish. But in a matter of 2 weeks, she had not only taught herself to understand English, but could read it as well. Dan told them that he'd been to see her. She was distant and antisocial, but when he looked into her eyes, he saw a bright intelligence there. She was a sad, lost little girl who needed the right home to bring her out and let her shine. Pardon me. The Rileys looked at each other and spoke through their eyes like most people who have been married a long time can do. They both knew they couldn't deny this little girl, but they told Dan it was a family decision. So they brought in Hector and Sadie, who are now 9 and 10 years old, and filled them in on everything. Then they asked how Hector and Sadie felt about having a little sister. Hector asked how old she was, and Dan told him that they weren't sure since she couldn't remember and there weren't any birth records, but the doctors determined she was about 5 years old. Sadie asked what her name was, and Dan said that she didn't have an official name yet, but one of the nurses started calling her Ariel since she was found in the water and didn't talk. So everyone started calling her that for lack of anything else. The Rileys all groaned. Tess said it was horrible to put that stigma on the poor girl. Dan assured them that it wasn't set in stone. The girl barely acknowledged the name anyway. They could come up with something else and make it official. Both Hector and Sadie said that they were cool with the new little sister. So the Rileys prepared for one more to join the family. "Wait, you're supposed to be telling me about your story," Adam interjected. "I told you not to interrupt," Ari said, frustrated. "If you insist on making me tell you my story, then you're just going to have to deal with the way I tell it. So please, just hush and listen." The first thing that I can remember is waking up in the hospital. Though at the time I didn't know it was a hospital. To me, it was just a strange, unfamiliar place. I was in a bed with tubes and wires coming off of me, and I was consumed with an overwhelming sense of fear and panic. I had to escape. I had to run. I had to get away from something. I couldn't remember what. I yanked off the wire. Pardon the interruption. Coyotes are out, so the dogs are going off. I yanked off the wires, and ignoring the pain, I pulled out the tubes connected to me, causing beeps and alarms to go off, which made me freak out even more. I jumped off the bed and ran out of the room and down the hall. I must have been a wily little kid, because no one was able to catch me until I reached the front entrance. A large male nurse grabbed me before I could make it out the doors. I tried to fight him off with a manic fury until someone injected me with a sedative. Then it all went dark. The next time I woke up, the fear and panic were replaced by sadness and a fierce longing for something, someone. My heart was yearning for something my mind couldn't remember. My arms and legs were strapped down by restraints to prevent me from running off again, but they soon came off when I proved to be docile. The doctors and nurses would talk to me, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. Their voices were soft and their intentions... Oh, they're about to go off again. Pardon. Bum, bum, bum. Their voices were soft and their intentions were good, so when they'd motion for me to do things, I'd do them. If they put food in front of me, I'd eat it. The nurses would turn the TV on in my room to PBS to keep me entertained. I didn't understand it, but it was colorful and musical, so I kept my attention. To me, everything felt distant and wrong. Things weren't as they should be. Sometimes they'd take me to a room with toys and other children. I wasn't interested in interacting with them, and since I just sat there and didn't say anything, they weren't interested in me either. Soon I started to understand the words people were saying to me, but even though I understood the words, I couldn't speak them. It was like there was a wall in my mind that they were all stuck behind, like the wall that was holding back all my memories. Once the doctors realized I could understand them, they started asking me yes or no questions. They told me to nod my head for yes and shake my head for no. Do you remember your name? No, I shook my head. Do you know how old you are? No, I shook my head. Do you know where your parents are? No, I shook my head. Do you remember where you lived before you came here? No, I shook my head again. All the answers they wanted were behind the wall in my mind, and it frustrated me, so I tuned out. I was no one from nowhere. Between the alphabet books they let me look at and watching the PBS shows, I figured out how to read. Once it clicked, it seemed so simple. Each letter had a sound, put the sounds together to make words. When they took me to the playroom, I went straight for the books they kept on some shelves. I went through all the easy ones pretty quickly. The more I read, the easier it became. Soon I began reading a set of child encyclopedias that they had. My mind was taking in information, processing it, and storing it, but I still couldn't connect with anyone or anything. Everything still felt off. I was trying to hold on to something that was out of reach. One day a man came to see me. He asked how I was. I didn't know, so I shrugged. He asked me if I wanted a new family. That made me stop and think. Did I? I knew what families were. I had read about them and seen them on TV, and I had seen kids with their parents at the hospital. Was that for me? I didn't know, so I shrugged. He looked into my eyes, and I understood his intentions. He wanted what was best for me. He wanted to help me. I wished that he could. My hand reached up to the side of his face, as if on its own. It felt like something that I might have done before. It felt like something was supposed to happen, but nothing did. So disappointedly, I put my hand back down and turned my attention back to Sesame Street. A couple days later, they dressed me in a red and yellow sundress and put a matching headband in my short hair, I guess to make me more girly looking. They packed up a little bag with the clothes that the charity people had given me and a teddy bear that had been in my room since I had woken up. They told me that Mr. Ramsey was going to come later to pick me up and take me to go live with my new family. I didn't know how I felt about that. The hospital was all that I had known. Mr. Ramsey came that afternoon. He walked into my room with a big smile and a kind greeting. He grabbed my bag and told me to follow him. As we made our way through the hospital, the nurses waved goodbye and wished me luck. I hadn't been to the front entrance doors since the first time I woke up. When we walked towards them and they opened by themselves to the world beyond, I froze. He assured me that everything was all right, and he gently took my hand to lead me through the doors into the humid savanna air and out to the parking lot. Normally I didn't like to be touched, but I was nervous, so I let him hold my hand. The world outside the hospital overwhelmed me. The sights, the sounds, the smells, they bombarded my senses. The ride to the Rileys was a blur. Mr. Ramsey had talked to me on the way, but I barely registered anything he said. Soon we pulled up to a pale gray house that looked straight out of a storybook. White picket fence, rocking chairs on the front porch, and a beautiful, fragrant flowers bloomed all around. We got out of the car and walked up to the front door. Mr. Ramsey gave me a reassuring smile and then rang the doorbell. I heard a dog bark and a woman's voice saying, "Sit, Roosevelt." The door was opened by a pretty girl with brown skin and a bit darker than mine. Tightly curled hair, cinnamon brown eyes, and a big dimply smile. "She's here!" she called excitedly back over her shoulder. "Hi, I'm Sadie. I'm your new big sister. And that's Hector. He's your new big brother." She pointed to a boy with big brown eyes, short dark hair like mine, and a shy smile. A large black, brown, and white dog came up to sniff me. I'd seen dogs in books and on TV, but not up close and personal like this. I took a nervous step back. Oh. Let's try that again. "Oh, it's all right, sweetheart. He's just curious," said an older woman with pale skin, short blonde hair, and a friendly smile. "Sit, Roosevelt." The dog immediately sat, with his tongue out and tail wagging. Sadie knelt down and scratched the dog behind his ears. "This is Roosevelt. He's our dog. He's a Bernese mountain dog, and he's super sweet and super smart. He actually knows when I'm going to have a seizure and lets Mom and Dad know. Isn't that cool? But don't worry, it's not like those scary shaking seizures. I just kind of black out and don't even know I'm having one. Hector says I just kind of sit there and look spaced out." A tall man with gray hair, light blue eyes, and a kind face came over and placed a hand on Sadie's shoulder. "All right, Sadie, let's let them get in the door," he said with a smile and a wink for me. He motioned for us to come in. Mr. Ramsey lightly put his hand on my back to make me go forward into the house. The front door led right into an open living room. It was big but cozy looking. Sadie went to go sit on one of the couches with Hector and the blonde woman. The tall man squatted down so he could be eye level with me, but also making sure not to get in my personal space. "My name is Phil, and that pretty lady over there on the couch is Tess." He pointed over at Tess, who smiled and waved. "They're your new Mom and Dad," Sadie blurted out with a big smile. Phil gave her a patient smile and chuckled. "You can call us Phil and Tess until you feel comfortable calling us Mom and Dad." I just stood there looking at these people telling me that they were my family. They were perfectly nice people and their intentions were all well-meaning and positive, but I couldn't let go of the feeling I was missing something. Something important. "Wow, she really doesn't talk at all, does she?" Hector asked, amazed. "She's just the strong, silent type," Phil said with a smile and a wink. "Can I ask her?" Sadie asked excitedly. Phil and Tess nodded in assent, so she went on. "We were wondering if you'd like the name Kira. I got it from a book I've been reading. The character is brave and smart, and we all agreed it was a pretty name. What do you think? Do you like it?" I nodded my head. One name was as good as another. It didn't really matter to me. Mr. Ramsey said that he had to get going and gave my shoulder a squeeze. He said that he would keep in touch to see how things were going, and then he waved goodbye to everyone and left. Sadie hopped off the couch, grabbed my bag from the floor, and told me to follow her. She was going to show me my new room. Tess gave me an encouraging nod while Sadie took my hand and guided me up the stairs. "The bathroom is there," she pointed to the left. "Hector's room is there," she pointed to the right. "Mom and Dad's room is at the end of the hall, and our room is right here." She opened the second door on the left. It was a big room with 2 beds. On the left was one with a purple cover. You all right over there? And on the right was one with a pink cover. In between the beds was a large bay window with a window seat full of colorful pillows. Hanging down from the ceiling right in front of the window was a mobile of crystals of all different shapes and sizes. They refracted colorful light all over the room. It was beautiful. I didn't know why, but it brought me a sense of peace and comfort. "You like the crystals?" That was Mom's idea. I love my rainbows. Well, our rainbows now. Excuse me. Pardon. "You like the crystals?" That was Mom's idea. I love my rainbows. Well, our rainbows now, Sadie said with a smile. She put my bag on the purple bed. The bed frame was wrought iron and was painted white. It looked old and had brass knobs at the corners of the bed. I walked up and put my hand on one of the knobs to feel the cool smoothness of the metal. "This is your bed. Do you like it? Mom found it at an antique shop in town. She loves old things. I hope you like purple. We didn't know what colors you liked, so we guessed. Do you like purple?" I nodded to make her happy. She skipped over the wooden floor to the other side of the room. There was a floor-to-ceiling mirror panel on the wall at the end of her bed, with a wooden bar running across it. "This is my dancing bar. I'm going to be a professional dancer when I grow up, so Dad installed it for me so I can practice at home." She did a spin on one foot while holding her arms out in front of her. "You showing off already, Sadie?" Hector teased as he walked into the room with a smirk. Sadie stopped spinning and stuck her tongue out at him. "You're just jealous you can't do this," she said while lifting her leg up to her head. "Can too," he replied, while awkwardly pulling his leg up and dramatically falling over, making them both laugh. It looked like they had a fun, easy relationship, where they could playfully tease without getting upset. Hector looked up at my blank face from where he still sat on the floor. "Really? Nothing? Not even a giggle?" He got up and patted my shoulder. "That's all right. We'll work on it." He gave me a reassuring smile. "Let me show you the closet," Sadie said, and then walked over and opened the closet doors. "The top half is my stuff and the bottom half is yours. It's mostly my old clothes, but don't worry, it's all in good shape. And we got some new stuff for you, too. It's all super cute." I didn't care about clothes, but it seemed like she did, so I nodded to show her I understood the clothes on the bottom were mine. Mom and Dad said we should take her outside and show her the backyard," Hector said. Pardon. So they guided me down the stairs and back through the living room, through the kitchen where Tess and Phil were cooking something, and out through the screened-in back porch to the backyard. The sunlight dappled through the leaves of the magnolia tree that stood on the left side of the porch and a large live oak on the right. The oak held an old tree house, and it had a long branch with a swinging hanging down from it. Straight off the back porch was a patio paved with old discolored bricks, which led to an encircled fountain. It was one of those large, old-fashioned fountains. It had a sculpture of a cherub holding a fish that spat out a stream of water into a basin that overflowed into a larger basin that held large goldfish and aquatic plants. The left side of the yard past the brick patio, in a nice sunny patch, was dedicated to Tess's garden, full of various fruits, vegetables, and fragrant herbs. To the right of the patio extended towards a detached garage. To the right, the patio extended towards a detached garage. There was a wisteria-covered trellis over the walkway between the garage side door and a door that led into the kitchen. A gate was at the end of the walkway that led out onto the driveway, towards the back of the yard. Past the fountain was a plot of grass with a small soccer goal on one side and a trampoline on the other. Tall hedges and flowering bushes lined the property, making it feel like their own magical garden, separated from the rest of the world. Hector ran to the trampoline, the kind with netting around it so kids wouldn't fly off. Sadie grabbed a hula hoop and said she was trying to beat the world record of 115 rotations. I ignored both of them and went straight for the fountain. I sat on the edge and let the water flow through my fingers. The combination of the sounds of the water and the birds singing in the trees and the way the light moved through the leaves and refracted off the water, it filled me with a peaceful contentment. The radiant light coming from the fish made them look like they were glowing underwater. Some of the large blossoms from the magnolia tree had fallen and were now floating on the surface, offering up their heavenly scent. It was all so beautiful. Roosevelt came and sat beside me, just happy to be by my side. I took comfort from his undemanding presence. That was our favorite spot. Well, that chapter went pretty quickly. That was the end of chapter 3. I think we're going to go ahead and go on to chapter 4. I'm going to have to figure out how to put this book down before I spend all night reading it. Just saying. Chapter 4. The next couple weeks I went through the motions and did what I was asked, but I still couldn't connect with the world around me. Then one morning, after a cooling rain the night before, we all went into the backyard. Tess was working in her garden, Hector was doing tricks on his skateboard, and Sadie was doing flips on the trampoline. I was sitting in my usual spot on the edge of the fountain, feeling in tune with the natural sounds and energies around me, until I heard a beautiful melody coming from somewhere beyond the hedges. It felt as though the music was calling to me. It seemed to promise answers to questions I didn't know how to ask. I followed the sound, and Roosevelt quietly followed behind me through the hedges into the next yard over. A large ground floor window was open on the back of a cream-colored house. Through the window, I could see a woman playing the piano. She was so engrossed in her playing that she didn't even notice Roosevelt and I as we made our way across the yard and onto the wraparound porch to stand outside the open window. The music was enchanting and felt rooted in place. The woman was younger than Tess and seemed somehow familiar, yet not. With her mocha skin, dark hair, and green eyes, listening to her play made my eyes start to water, and a tear slipped down my cheek. The woman finished the song and then jumped in surprise to see Roosevelt and I standing outside her window. "Oh, my goodness!" She placed a hand to her chest, and then she let out a nervous laugh. "You scared me, sweetie," she said with a musical southern accent. Oh, I wonder if I can do that better. "You scared me, sweet." No, oh gosh, that was terrible. I'm just going to go with what I had. "You scared me, sweetie," she said with a musical southern accent. Then she noticed Roosevelt sitting beside me. "Is that the Riley's dog?" I nodded, and then she noticed my tear-streaked face. "Oh, sweetie, what's wrong? Are you lost?" I shook my head no. I pointed to my ear and then to the piano. "You heard me playing and it made you cry?" I nodded and pointed to the piano again. I wanted to hear more. Just then we heard Tess and the kids yelling, "Kira!" They had finally noticed that I was gone. Roosevelt, recognizing his owner's voices, barked a couple times in response. Sadie burst through the hedges, looking around frantically. Then she noticed us on the porch. "Kira, there you are!" She blew out a relieved sigh before she called back through the hedge. "I found her, Mom. She's over at the Jacobs' house." She ran up the porch steps and scratched Roosevelt behind the ears. "Hi, Mrs. Jacobs. This is my new little sister, Kira. She doesn't talk, so when she wandered off, we were scared we'd never find her." She knelt down and saw my wet face. "Kira, are you hurt? Why are you crying?" She wiped my tears away with her thumbs. She said, well, mimed, that she heard me playing the piano and it made her cry." No, I wasn't crying. My eyes just welled up with the emotions the music made me feel. But whatever, I just wanted to hear more. Tess and Hector came around to the back of the wraparound porch from the front. I apologize, Rachel. She usually doesn't wander off like this," Tess said as she came over to the open window. "No problem, Tess. I had the windows open to take advantage of the beautiful weather. And I guess I Pied Pipered her over here with my piano playing." They both laughed, and then Tess held out her hand to me so she could take me back home. I couldn't go home yet. I wanted to hear more music. I shook my head frantically and pointed to the piano. "Come on, Kira, let's go back home," Tess coaxed. I didn't move. "It's okay, Tess. She can come in and see the piano if she wants. It's not a problem," Rachel invited. "Mom, the music made her cry. It's the most emotion I've seen her show about anything," Sadie said, trying to plead my case for me. "All right, if it's not an imposition," Tess relented. Rachel shook her head to say that it wasn't. "Okay, Hector, will you take Roosevelt back home, please?" He nodded and ran the dog back home. Rachel came to the back door and let us in. Then she took us to the room with the piano. I walked over to it and then looked over to Rachel to see if I could touch it. She nodded and told me to go ahead. I started on the far right and walked my fingers down every key to the end on the far left, setting all the notes to memory. Rachel came over and sat on the bench and then played Hot Cross Buns and asked if I could play that. I played it easily. Then she played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and I was able to play that note for note as well. She looked over at Tess in amazement and then played the Happy Birthday song, and again I was able to play it without a problem. "She's got a natural talent and a great ear for notes. That's amazing." Then with one hand I started playing a song I had heard Sadie dancing to earlier. Once I knew how all the notes sounded, it was simple. The music soothed my soul and freed my mind in a way nothing else had. I was filled with happiness, so I smiled. Tess gasped and brought her hand to her mouth as her eyes misted with happy tears. Sadie explained to Rachel through her dimpled smile. She's been with us for about 2 weeks, and this is the first time we've ever seen her smile. Tess knelt down and hugged me. I let her as I continued to plunk out notes on the piano. Hector ran back onto the porch and peered through the window. Hector, Kira smiled, Sadie squealed in excitement. Really? That's awesome, Kira. He gave me two big thumbs up. Tess stood back up. Looks like we need to get this girl a piano. I can give her lessons if you want. Teach her how to read music, Rachel offered. That sounds like a great idea. How much would you want for the lessons? Rachel waved a dismissive hand. You don't have to pay me. I'll give you a neighborhood discount. And only ask for some goodies from that famous garden of yours every now and then. Tess agreed, and then asked me if I would like to come back and take lessons from Miss Rachel. I nodded emphatically. So, Tess and Rachel arranged for me to come over on Friday afternoons for my lessons. Then we said our goodbyes and went back home. Tess made me promise never to wander off like that again and that I must let someone know if I wanted to go somewhere. I promised that I would, and that was that. After the emotional high of the piano incident came down, I went back to being distant. I was still holding on to that feeling of not belonging. My heart was still stubbornly yearning for that mysterious something. At night, I was having nightmares, and I would wake up in a panicky sweat. I was never able to remember what they were about, only that I was running away from something. Sadie was a deep sleeper, so I never woke her up when I would jerk awake and take in big gulps of air to try and calm myself down. It was always hard for me to get back to sleep, so I'd sneak downstairs and go into Phil's office. We weren't supposed to go in there, but he had 2 walls of bookshelves filled with all kinds of books. I'd already gone through most of the history and mythology books and the first 2 volumes of his Encyclopedia Britannica set. On the night that I started on the 3rd volume, I heard Phil's soft voice coming from the doorway. So you're the one who's been sneaking in here. My head snapped around and I froze in fear. He gave me a sympathetic smile and sat down on the small couch near the door. It's all right, Sweet Pea. No need to be scared. You're not in any trouble. You've been taking real good care of my books, and I appreciate that. He looked over at the book I was reading by the window. Are you reading the encyclopedia in the dark? He chuckled. I shrugged my shoulders as he turned on a lamp sitting on the side table by the couch. I didn't understand why he was puzzled. I had plenty of light coming from the moonlight shining through the window and the radiant light coming off the potted plants on the windowsill. Have you been having trouble sleeping? He asked, concerned. I nodded and looked down at my feet. Have you been having nightmares? Not looking up, I nodded again. Do you remember what the nightmares are about? I shook my head no. Do you come down here when you can't fall back to sleep? I nodded. What's your favorite book so far? I looked up, and he motioned to the bookshelves, urging me to show him which book I liked best. So I walked over to the one of the shelved walls and got on my tiptoes to point at the book of Greek mythology. The stories were interesting, and it had pretty illustrations. Phil got up from the couch and walked over to pull out the book and take a look at it. This is one of my favorites, too. It's always nice to remember that the gods were just as flawed and petty as the rest of us. He gave me a wink and a smile. I haven't read this in ages, he mused as he turned back towards the couch, flipping through the pages. Do you mind if I read this out loud? I shook my head and shrugged my shoulders. It was his office. He could do what he wanted. He grabbed his reading glasses from his desk and then sat back down on the couch. He flipped a couple more pages and said, here we go. And then he proceeded to read the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. That was one of my favorite stories. I put the encyclopedia back where it belonged and then cautiously made my way over to the couch as he continued to read. I liked the sound of his voice and the way he read, so I climbed on the other end of the couch and sat on my knees so I could look at the pictures. Soon I was so engrossed in the story that I had climbed into his lap so I could read along and see the pictures better. I leaned back against him, and between the vibrations coming from his chest and his soft, calming voice, I fell asleep. I guess soon after he did as well, because Tess had come down in the wee hours of the morning to find us both asleep in his office. Phil was snoring away, and I was cuddled up in his arms. She had said later on that she had nearly died of the cuteness. She gently woke him up, and they both marveled at the miracle we had wrought by getting me to cuddle with him. The most Tess had been able to get out of me at this point was that one-sided hug by the piano. Phil carried me back upstairs to my room, and then they tucked me back into bed. I was barely conscious enough to feel them both kiss me on the head, and I didn't mind too much. The next morning was as distant as usual for me. Phil went to work before we came down to breakfast. Sadie and Hector watched TV and joked around, while Tess worked out in the garden and I sat on the swing while Roosevelt watched. That afternoon, Tess took us to the library. As we walked in, Tess said hello to the lady behind the front counter. She waved us over, so I followed Tess and the kids as they walked to the counter. She was a kind-looking lady with short black hair and dark brown skin. She looked a bit younger than Tess and seemed friendly, but I could almost feel the intensity of the look she gave me, like she was looking into my soul. No one else seemed to notice. "Well, hello, Lordy, my voice." "Well, hello, Riley's," she said quietly with a smile. "Hi, Miss Ruby," said Haiti and Sector together. "And who is this adorable little girl?" she asked, smiling down at me. I didn't want to meet her eyes. They were too intense. "This is our little sister, Kira," Sadie volunteered. "She doesn't talk," Hector added. "Well, I'm sure she will in her own time, huh, Kira?" I just looked down at my shoes. "Well, all right. Y'all find some good books, okay?" "Yes, ma'am, we will," Sadie replied. Then they turned towards the children's section. As we walked, I looked back over my shoulder at Miss Ruby. She was still looking at me and gave me an enigmatic smile and a nod. Thoroughly creeped out, I turned back around and caught up to Tess. When we got to the children's section, Sadie and Hector went their separate ways looking for books. I sat down in a reading chair, watching everyone else. Tess asked if I wanted her to look for some books for me, and I nodded and shrugged to say, sure, why not? She told me to stay where I was, so I did, and she went to go pick out some books for me. I must have spaced out for a bit, because all of a sudden Miss Ruby was right in front of me. She gently held one of my hands in hers, and then she placed her other hand on my cheek, making sure her fingertips were touching my temple. She looked intently into my eyes, and then it was as if the world around us disappeared. It was only us. I was about to freak out, but she radiated calmness and reassurance. Her voice was kind but insistent. "Kira, you are a very special little girl, and you will accomplish great things. But you have to let go of what's holding you back. You have a wonderful family that will give you everything you need, but you must let them in." She paused to make sure I understood, and then her voice seemed to get deeper. "Cut the ties with the things that bind you, little one, and embrace the light and love that is offered." And with that, she let go of my head and hand, and the world returned around us. Ruby leaned back on her heels and gave me that enigmatic smile and nod again. Her intentions were only for my well-being, so I nodded back at her. Just then, Tess came walking up with a pile of books in her arms. Ruby stood up and they started talking, so I tuned out and started thinking, did that really just happen? Did this woman really just speak directly to my mind? The things she said, was I really capable of great things? Could I let go of the phantom memories that still called to me? "You have a very special little girl here, Tess." "We certainly think so." Tess looked down at me with an affectionate smile. Sadie and Hector came over with piles of books of their own, so we all went to the front counter to check out. We all waved goodbye to Miss Ruby as we went out the doors to our van parked outside. After we got home and dropped off our books inside, Tess started making dinner, and Sadie, Hector, and I went out to go play in the driveway. Well, they played. I watched from the grass. Our driveway was the kind that attracted neighborhood kids. Between the basketball hoop hanging over the garage door, the skateboard rail Hector had built with Phil, and the fact that Sadie and Hector were nice kids who were fun to be around, kids just naturally gravitated there. I sat on the grass and watched the chaos around me. Sadie and her friends were trying double dutch and failing miserably, but they were having fun all the same. Hector and his friends were doing skateboard stunts and riding down Jack's wheelchair ramp. And there were a couple of kids playing basketball. One of the kids shot the ball, but it bounced off the rim and then rolled by me. So I got up and grabbed the ball, and then brought it back over to them on the driveway. But I guess I stood there too long because someone pushed me from behind and said, "Watch out, weirdo, you're in the way." Totally caught by surprise, I went down hard. Pain burned my hands and left knee. I sat up to take a look. My hands were just scraped, but my knee started to bleed pretty badly. The stinging pain made my eyes start to water. Sadie came running over. "Kira, you're bleeding. Are you okay?" When I nodded my head, tears spilled down my cheeks, and my bottom lip began to quiver. Sadie ran inside to go get Tess. When Hector saw her run inside, he immediately stopped what he was doing. "What happened?" he called out. The kids playing basketball all pointed to the aggressor. One of them yelled, "Dustin pushed her for no reason." Hector looked at Dustin like a bull ready to charge. "You hurt my little sister, jerkwad. I'm going to kill you." Dustin turned and ran like the coward he was, and Hector chased after him. He had run all the way to the end of the driveway before Tess and Sadie came out, and Tess shouted, "Hector, stop!" He turned and shouted back, "But he hurt Kira! But he hurt Kira!" He was trying to control the rage he felt towards the boy who dared to hurt one of his sisters. Take a deep breath and think, what is the most important thing right now? She spread her arms out wide. Big picture. He took a couple deep breaths and then looked over at me. Kira, helping Kira is most important right now. Tess smiled. That's right. She told the other kids it was time to go home. Then she came over to me, wiped away my tears, and then gently picked me up and brought me inside. As we came in, Tess told Sadie to get the first aid kit. She carried me into the kitchen and sat me on the counter by the sink. You are such a brave girl, Kira. Now we're going to rinse off your hands and clean up your knee, okay? She turned on the faucet and placed my hands under the stream of water. I hissed an intake of breath when the running water stung my hands. Tess looked at me with sympathy. It's going to hurt when you cleanse a wound, but you have to get all the dirt and toxins out so it can heal. I nodded as she gently patted my hands with a paper towel. The trick is to blow out the pain like you're blowing out a candle. She pursed her lips and blew out a stream of air to show me how. I mimicked her, and she smiled and told me that it was just right. Sadie came into the kitchen with the first aid kit and placed it on the counter by me, and then she sat at the table with Hector to watch and give moral support. Tess got an alcohol wipe from the kit and then gently dabbed my knee with it. I took a deep breath and blew out the pain, like she said. At that moment, the fog in my mind cleared, and I was able to see Tess for who she really was. A woman who took me into her home and loved me unconditionally. She took care of me and gave me all her love without asking for anything in return. I looked over at Sadie, a girl who claimed me as her sister from the first moment, a girl who took joy from my happiness and was willing to share everything she had with me. Then I looked at Hector, my champion and protector, a boy willing to fight any foe for me. As Tess was placing a large bandage on my knee, I remembered Ruby's words. Cut ties with the things that bind you and embrace the light and love that is offered. I blew out another cleansing breath, and I finally let go of the phantom memories. I let in the light and love that my family offered, and then I felt joy and love fill the empty places in my soul. Tess finished placing the bandage and looked up to see tears in my eyes and a smile on my face. And being 5 years old, I took Ruby's words the most literal way possible. I wrapped my arms around Tess's neck and my legs around her waist, fully embracing her and claiming her as my mother. She was totally taken by surprise, and it took her a second to realize what was going on. But once she did, she wrapped me up in her arms and kissed me on my head, joyful tears falling down her face. Sadie and Hector looked at us, and then at each other in amazement. I held out one of my arms to them, and it didn't take more than a couple seconds for them to scramble over us to join in the hug. Love and contentment permeated the room. I tucked my head into my mom's neck and breathed in her clean scent of herbs and soap. Just then, Dad came home from work. He walked in through the side kitchen door and took in the scene in front of him. He was hit with the cloud of emotional energy emanating from us, and his eyes started to tear up. Without looking, I held out my arm to him, and it only took him 2 steps to reach us and envelop us all in his embrace. Even Roosevelt came in and sat beside us, wagging his tail. At that moment, I truly became Kira Riley. And that is the end of chapter 4. And at 46 minutes, I think we'll end this real quickly. My voice is losing it, so I don't know if I'll be doing another chapter tonight, although I so dearly want to. We'll just have to wait till next time. So for tonight, I bid you adieu. Thank you for joining me for chapters 3 and 4 of the Transcendent series. And hopefully I will see you all back for chapter 5.